For 20,000 years, humanity had vanished from the galaxy. No ships, no signals, no signs of life. The stars had grown crowded with other civilizations. Empires that rose and fell, all believing that humans were nothing but a story, a legend that once existed on a distant, forgotten planet. Some called Earth a myth. Others thought it had been destroyed by its own people, a cautionary tale about the fragility of life. No one knew the truth, but deep in the cold, dark corners of space, something slept, waiting for the day it would be remembered. It was not just a ship. It was a world unto itself, as massive as a small continent, carved and built by hands long gone, powered by engines that could bend the very energy of stars. For millennia, it had drifted silently, hidden beneath layers of ice and dust, resting on a moon that no one thought to explore. Its hull was scarred not by war but by the passage of time, the slow burn of centuries pressing against its exterior. Yet despite the stillness, life lingered within. Humans lay in cryogenic chambers, preserved as they had been 20,000 years before. They were alive, but they did not know it. Their dreams were silent, their minds untouched by the centuries. They waited for the universe to call them once more. In the wider galaxy, life went on. Civilizations fought for territory, discovered new planets and formed alliances. Machines built cities in orbit, and beings of many shapes and sizes moved across the stars, each confident that humanity no longer existed. They celebrated their technology, their power, their progress. Some even mocked the stories of Earth, calling it a foolish planet that had destroyed itself. And yet no one noticed that the galaxy had a gap in its history, a silence in the records, a missing note in the song of the cosmos. That silence had a name: humanity. The discovery of the ship began by accident. A small mining vessel looking for rare minerals on the edge of the Orion Arm detected something unusual. The readings were strange. Materials older than any known civilization, energy signatures that could not be explained. The ship's crew was cautious, unsure if it was a natural formation or a relic of something long gone. They reported it, calling it an anomaly, not realizing that the anomaly they found was one of the most important objects in the galaxy. When the news reached the Galactic Council, there was excitement, curiosity, and fear. A team of scientists and researchers was sent to investigate, armed with the latest tools, the most advanced probes, and a sense of confidence. They expected to find old debris, maybe a forgotten station or a relic of a civilization that had vanished. What they found instead was impossible. The ship was alive in ways no one could explain. Its systems were dormant but intact, waiting for something or someone to awaken them. The hull was covered with symbols, strange markings that no one could read, yet somehow felt familiar, as if they resonated with something deep inside the observer. Inside the ship, the cryogenic chambers were still operating, preserving the humans within. Each one was perfectly frozen, untouched by disease, aging, or time. They had been selected, prepared, and sent into slumber with a purpose no one alive had remembered. The people of Earth had not vanished. They had hidden, choosing silence over conflict, patience over power, and now the universe was about to meet them again. For those watching from the outside, it was hard to believe. Scientists argued among themselves, debating whether it was a hoax, a natural phenomenon, or some trick of the sensors. Military observers worried. What if these humans were a threat? What if they had come back to reclaim the galaxy by force? The Galactic Council was divided. There was no protocol for something like this. Nothing in their archives to explain a civilization that could disappear for 20,000 years and return intact. Yet the ship remained silent, unmoving, as if it were waiting for the right moment. And then slowly it began to stir. Systems flickered to life, subtle at first, like a heartbeat in the dark. Lights glimmered along the corridors, faint at first, then stronger, cutting through the shadow of ages. The engines, long dormant, hummed softly, a vibration that could be felt even outside the hull. Something inside the ship had recognized the presence of others, and the awakening had begun. The humans inside remained asleep, unaware of the galaxy outside. Their dreams were filled with echoes of a world that no longer existed, memories of a home long gone. Some dreamed of oceans and mountains, of forests and cities, of friends and family who had faded into history. Others dreamed of technology, of machines that could reach the stars, of ships that could carry them across the galaxy. Every dream was a whisper of what they had been, a reminder that even in slumber they were still human. Outside, The galaxy held its breath. No one knew what would happen when these humans awoke. Would they be hostile? Would they be confused, fragile, lost in a universe that had moved on without them? Or would they rise as they had before and show the galaxy a power that no one could imagine? The answer lay inside the ship, silent and waiting. For 20,000 years, humanity had been a shadow. They had been a ghost story told by other civilizations, a cautionary tale of what happens when a species disappears. But now that shadow was stirring. The ship, ancient and silent, was about to reveal the truth. Humanity had not vanished. They had only been waiting. And when they finally emerged, the galaxy would remember them, not as a myth, but as a force that had never truly been gone. In the darkness, the first signs of awakening spread through the ship. Energy coursed through conduits, systems hummed with life, and the cryogenic chambers began their slow, precise work to bring the humans back. It was a delicate process requiring patience, precision, and care. One mistake could destroy what had been preserved for millennia. Yet the ship had been built to endure, built to survive time itself. And slowly the first humans would awaken, unaware of the universe they were about to meet. The galaxy, confident and loud, continued with its affairs. Empires negotiated treaties, fleets moved through space, and scholars debated theories. None of them realized that the first chapter of humanity's return had already begun. Somewhere in the dark, beneath layers of ice and rock, the pulse of a civilization long forgotten was about to touch the stars again. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. For 20,000 years, humanity had been silent. But silence is not absence. It is waiting, watching, learning, preparing. And now the wait was over. The first spark had ignited. The first light had flickered. And the galaxy would soon understand that the legend of Earth was not a story. It was a warning. The story of humanity was about to begin again. The discovery of the massive ship sent ripples through the galaxy. At first, no one could believe it. Reports came in from the mining vessel that first stumbled upon it, describing a metallic structure larger than any known station, covered with unknown symbols and strange energy readings. The Galactic Council called it an anomaly, a curiosity. Scientists argued over the data, while military leaders quietly prepared for every possible outcome. Some believed it was just a derelict ship, perhaps a relic of a long-lost civilization. Others, more cautious, whispered that it could be a weapon of unimaginable power. A research fleet was dispatched to investigate. The ships approached cautiously, scanning every inch of the massive hull. The readings were confusing. The materials were ancient, older than any recorded civilization in the galaxy. Some of the energy signatures were completely foreign, bending space in ways that the most advanced technology could not replicate. Sensors kept flickering, unable to stabilize. It was as if the ship itself resisted observation. Yet every scientist and observer aboard those ships felt a strange pull, something deep inside that whispered, "This is not just a machine. This is alive." When the explorers finally managed to dock, they were struck by the sheer scale of the interior. The corridors stretched farther than their scanners could reach, filled with chambers, rooms, and structures that no one could fully comprehend. Every surface was engraved with symbols, strange, flowing lines that seemed to pulse faintly as if they had a heartbeat of their own. Attempts to decode them proved useless. The language was lost to time, yet somehow everyone who saw it felt a sense of recognition, a deep familiarity that could not be explained. And then they found the cryogenic chambers. Hundreds of them, lined up with precision and care. Each one held a human, preserved perfectly as if time had forgotten them. Their features were peaceful, almost serene, frozen in a moment of sleep. There was no disease, no decay, no sign of the centuries that had passed. It was as if they had been waiting, prepared to awaken when the universe was ready to meet them again. The scientists were overwhelmed. They had expected to find machines, data logs, perhaps artifacts of a lost civilization. They had not expected to find humans. There was a stunned silence aboard the fleet as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what they had discovered. These were not descendants of humans, not distant relatives. They were humans themselves, exactly as they had been 20,000 years ago. The news spread quickly across the galaxy. Scholars debated, politicians panicked, and the public was fascinated. Many could not believe that humans still existed. The stories of Earth, long dismissed as myth, now had evidence. The legends of a species that had vanished suddenly became reality. Histories were rewritten in hours, and civilizations that had once mocked the idea of Earth found themselves humbled. No one had expected this. Humanity, silent for millennia, had returned. Meanwhile, inside the ship, subtle systems began to stir. Lights flickered on in patterns that were almost rhythmic. Energy pulsed through the hull like a heartbeat, though no one could see it. The ship's main reactor, dormant for 20,000 years, hummed softly, preparing for something. The humans inside remained asleep, unaware of the chaos unfolding outside. Their dreams were peaceful, full of echoes of a world long gone. Some dreamed of oceans, some of mountains, some of skies they had never seen. Every dream carried a memory of home, a fragment of what humanity once was. The council struggled to decide what to do. There were factions within it. Some wanted to approach cautiously, to study the humans and their technology before making contact. Others wanted to isolate the ship, fearing what might happen if these long-lost humans were allowed to move freely. There was fear, certainly, but there was also curiosity, a desire to understand what had allowed a species to survive untouched for so long. The galaxy had seen great civilizations rise and fall, but nothing like this. Humanity had been gone, silent, and now it was back. Contact attempts were made. Probes were sent inside the ship, but each one was met with subtle resistance. Systems would shut down unexpectedly. Corridors would appear longer or shorter on scans, and energy fields would interfere with the instruments. It became clear that the ship was not passive. It was aware in some way, reacting to the presence of outsiders. The researchers realized that this was not just a vessel. It was a guardian, built to protect its inhabitants and awaken them only when the universe was ready. As days passed, small changes became noticeable. Lights along the corridors began to stabilize. Energy readings grew stronger. The cryogenic chambers, though still closed, showed signs of preparation, subtle movements inside that indicated life had not been dormant all along. It was as if the ship itself was waking up in anticipation. The humans inside, while still asleep, were about to become aware of a galaxy they had never seen. The alien civilizations that had gathered to observe the discovery watched with a mixture of awe and fear. They had never encountered anything like this. Some ships hovered at a distance, scanning from afar, unsure of what might happen next. Others sent envoys, hoping to establish communication. But the ship remained quiet, its secrets locked away, revealing only enough to show that humanity had survived, untouched, and ready. Inside the ship, the first signs of awakening were subtle. A light flickered over one cryogenic chamber. Sensors detected movement within another. Systems that had been silent for millennia began to hum softly, generating warmth, energy, and life. The ship was alive, and it was preparing its passengers for the world outside. Every circuit, every engine, every energy conduit seemed to work in harmony, as if anticipating a signal that had yet to arrive. For the humans observing from outside, the experience was overwhelming. They had expected artifacts, maybe some ancient data, but not living beings who had been preserved for 20,000 years. They struggled to imagine what it would mean to wake someone who had slept through millennia, who had never seen the new civilizations, who had no memory of what had happened since their disappearance. There was excitement, yes, but also a deep sense of responsibility. Humanity was not just a discovery. It was a living legacy, a species returned to a galaxy that had thought it lost forever. Speculation ran wild. Scholars debated how humans had survived, what technology had allowed this, and whether it could be replicated. Philosophers wondered what it meant for the galaxy to discover a species that had been silent for so long. Politicians argued over who had the right to approach, who could study them, and what risks might exist. But amid all the noise, one truth was undeniable. Humanity had been underestimated. The galaxy had forgotten them, and that was about to change. Slowly, the ship's systems continued their work. The cryogenic chambers began subtle cycles of preparation, adjusting temperatures, regulating fluids, and checking vitals. It was precise, careful, and deliberate. Each human within was preserved perfectly, not by luck but by engineering far beyond anything the current galaxy could comprehend. The ship was a masterwork, a time capsule, and a guardian all in one. It had waited patiently for thousands of years, for the moment its passengers would awaken and reclaim their place among the stars. Outside, the research teams could only watch. Every scan revealed more mysteries. Hallways seemed to stretch endlessly. Machines functioned without apparent power sources. Energy readings suggested that the ship could move, even alter gravity, though no one knew how. The scale of it was impossible to fully understand, yet it was undeniable. Humanity had built something extraordinary, something the galaxy had never seen before, and now that something was alive again. And so, for the first time in 20,000 years, the galaxy held its breath. The ship lay in the darkness, waiting, while humans inside slept, unaware of the new worlds around them. Outside observers watched in awe, fear, and curiosity, realizing that what they had discovered was not a relic, but a civilization ready to emerge. Humanity had been silent, but now the first signs of awakening were stirring. The galaxy, which had long dismissed them as a myth, was about to see the truth. In the silence of space, the ship hummed softly, a gentle pulse that promised life, power, and a return to the stars. Humanity had waited long enough. The moment of discovery had passed, and now, the moment of awakening was beginning. The story of humans thought lost was unfolding again, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The awakening began quietly, almost imperceptibly. At first, it was just a flicker of light along the corridors, a soft hum in the ship's systems that had been dormant for 20,000 years. Scientists observing from the outside noticed the subtle changes and exchanged glances filled with disbelief. Every sensor, every probe, every camera picked up the faintest pulse of energy moving through the vessel. Something was stirring inside. Something that had waited for centuries, patient and silent, was beginning to awaken. Inside the ship, the first humans shifted in their cryogenic chambers. At first it was slight, a twitch of a finger, a flutter of an eyelid. The chambers monitored every movement, responding with precise adjustments, keeping them safe while slowly bringing them back to consciousness. These humans had been frozen in time, preserved perfectly, and now their minds began to stir. Their dreams, long silent and unbroken, started to fade, replaced by awareness, curiosity, and instinct. They were waking into a world they had never seen, a galaxy that had grown and changed while they slept. Outside, the research teams could hardly believe what was happening. For weeks they had been careful, observing, studying, scanning, trying not to disturb the ancient vessel. Now they were witnessing a miracle. Human life, preserved for 20,000 years, was beginning to return. The data streams were filled with readings they could not interpret. And yet one thing was clear. These were not just bodies coming back to life. They were humans, fully aware, fully conscious, and ready to interact with the world again. The first chamber opened with a hiss of escaping air and a shimmer of energy. Inside, a human blinked awake, eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the chamber. At first, there was confusion. Memories of the past were hazy, fragmented, like shadows of a life they once knew. They looked around at the sleek walls, the panels filled with symbols, and the faint hum of energy coursing through the ship. Nothing was familiar, yet something deep inside resonated, a sense of purpose, a spark of recognition. As more chambers began to open, the humans emerged cautiously. Their movements were careful, almost instinctive, as if they remembered training from a long-lost past. They were not fragile or weak. Despite the centuries of sleep, their bodies were strong, and their minds were sharp. Every one of them carried the knowledge, skills, and instincts of their ancestors, preserved and waiting for the right moment to be used. The scientists and military observers outside were both fascinated and terrified. They had not expected this level of intelligence and awareness. These were not disoriented or confused beings. They were humans, but humans with a presence that spoke of power, strategy, and understanding far beyond what the galaxy had imagined. Conversations among the observers grew heated. Should they try to communicate immediately? Should they wait? Every choice seemed risky, because no one could predict how these humans would react to a galaxy that had forgotten them. The humans inside the ship began exploring their surroundings. The corridors were vast, filled with chambers, equipment, and strange technologies that seemed almost alive. They moved with confidence, touching controls, examining panels, understanding systems that had been silent for millennia. The ship responded to them as if it recognized its passengers, its long-dormant systems coming to life with precision and harmony. It was not just a vessel. It was a companion, a guardian, a world designed to preserve and protect its inhabitants until they were ready to return. Outside, alien observers were watching closely. Fleets that had gathered for curiosity now began to take precautionary measures. Some sent small drones closer to scan the ship, but each drone was immediately disabled by subtle energy fields, not violently, but carefully, as if the ship was testing the galaxy's intentions. There was no attack, no aggression, but a clear message: this was not to be interfered with. Humanity was awakening on its own terms. As the humans emerged, they began to communicate among themselves. Their voices were soft at first, almost cautious, filled with the wonder of waking after thousands of years. They shared observations, memories, and fragments of knowledge from before their long sleep. Some tried to piece together what had happened, to understand the world they had returned to. They realized that everything outside the ship was new, unfamiliar, yet they felt no fear. Their presence was calm, assured, and commanding. The galaxy had forgotten them, but they had not forgotten themselves. The scientists aboard the research fleet attempted communication. Simple messages were sent in multiple languages and frequencies, hoping to establish contact. The humans inside the ship paused, listening. Their response was not immediate but deliberate. They were cautious, observant, measuring the intentions of the world that had moved on without them. And when they did respond, it was with precision, clarity, and authority. The first words transmitted across the void carried weight, resonating in a way no one expected. Humanity was back, and it spoke with confidence. The reaction across the galaxy was instantaneous. Historians, politicians, and ordinary beings alike were stunned. Reports flooded in from every sector. A species that had been considered extinct was now alive, aware, and active. Civilizations that had built empires without challenge suddenly faced the reality that a powerful, intelligent species had returned to the stars. No one knew the scale of their capabilities, the strength of their knowledge, or the scope of their technology. And yet the presence alone was enough to command attention. Inside the ship, the humans began to explore deeper. They moved through engineering bays, data cores, and control rooms, learning and adapting to the systems that had waited for them. Every discovery was methodical, deliberate. They were not overwhelmed or confused. Their minds, trained and prepared long ago, adapted quickly to the unknown. The ship's system seemed almost to anticipate their actions, responding fluidly to their commands. It was as if the vessel had been alive in anticipation of this very moment, waiting for its passengers to take their place once more. Some of the humans ventured to the observation decks. Peering out into the expanse of space for the first time in millennia, they saw alien fleets, distant stars, and worlds that had risen in their absence. The universe had changed, yet they were not disoriented. Instead, they absorbed the information with careful attention, calculating, understanding, and preparing. It became clear that these humans were not simply survivors. They were masters of strategy, thinkers who could adapt, learn, and act in ways that civilizations across the galaxy had never seen. Back on the research ships, debates raged. Some wanted to establish formal diplomacy immediately, to negotiate and study. Others argued for caution, fearing that any misstep could trigger a conflict with beings who had been underestimated for thousands of years. It became clear that the humans inside the ship were not only alive, they were fully aware of the galaxy, and they had returned on their own terms. Any action taken without understanding their intentions could be dangerous. The first exchanges of knowledge were subtle. The humans shared fragments of information, hints about technology, energy systems, and ways of thinking that had been lost to time. It was enough to astonish the scientists, who realized that humanity's understanding of the universe was far beyond anything currently known. The aliens observing could only guess at the implications. These were not primitive humans. They were advanced, intelligent, and patient, a species that had survived not by force but by planning, waiting, and observing. And then the first signs of movement beyond the ship began. Small sections of the hull opened, revealing observation decks and docking bays. It was not an aggressive action, but a statement. Humanity was ready to interact with the galaxy. They had awakened, they had assessed their surroundings, and they were now taking the first steps to reclaim their presence. Every action was deliberate, precise, and measured. They had waited 20,000 years, and they were not going to act recklessly. The galaxy watched in awe. For centuries, humans had been stories, myths, or warnings. Now they were real. They were alive. And they were awake. Scholars argued, Fleets maneuvered cautiously, and every civilization wondered what this meant for their place in the universe. One thing became clear. Humanity had returned not as a shadow but as a living, thinking, and fully capable species. Inside the ship, the humans continued their preparations. They studied the alien ships outside, analyzed energy readings, and began to formulate plans. Not for war, not yet, but for understanding. They had awakened to a universe that had moved on, but they had not forgotten themselves. They had patience, intelligence, and the power of a civilization that had been prepared for millennia. The first contact had been made, but this was only the beginning. And so, humanity stirred. The galaxy, which had believed they were gone, could only watch as the ancient species returned to life, prepared to take their place once more. The silence that had lasted for 20,000 years was ending. Humanity had awoken, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The humans had awakened fully now. Their first steps outside the cryogenic chambers were careful, precise, but confident. They moved through the corridors of the ancient ship as if they had never left, their minds sharp and their bodies strong. Every action was deliberate, measured, and purposeful. The ship responded to them instantly, systems activating as if recognizing old friends. Lights brightened, engines hummed, and control panels came alive. It was not just a vessel anymore, it was a home, a base, a world. Outside the ship, the galaxy watched closely. Alien fleets had gathered, some out of curiosity, some out of fear. They had thought humanity was gone, a long-extinct species, but now they were wrong. Slowly, humans began to step out onto observation decks, scanning the vast expanse of space with calm, measured eyes. They were not afraid. They had seen nothing like the civilizations outside, but they understood quickly. Every planet, every ship, every star was being carefully recorded, calculated, and analyzed. These humans had patience, intelligence, and awareness far beyond what the galaxy had seen in other species. The first communication attempts with the outside civilizations were cautious. Humans did not speak first, but when they did, their voices carried authority. It was not loud or aggressive, but deliberate and clear. Every word was precise, conveying awareness, understanding, and calm. The galaxy realized that these were not ordinary humans. They were not confused or weak. They had been preserved, trained, and prepared for this moment. Every observer, every scientist, every alien commander knew this was different from anything they had encountered before. Inside the ship, humans explored the control rooms and data centers. They understood the technology instinctively, as if it had been part of their training long ago. They ran simulations, activated systems, and studied the energy flows. They discovered things that no one outside had even imagined. Their understanding of energy, gravity, and space travel was far more advanced than anything in the current galaxy. This was a civilization from the past, preserved and untouched, now returning to a galaxy that had moved on without them. Some of the humans ventured to the docking bays. Alien ships floated cautiously nearby, and the humans observed without aggression. They were aware of the potential threats, but they did not panic. Instead, they analyzed the fleets, their weapons, and their formations. Every movement was recorded, every system studied. They were not planning immediate conflict, but they were prepared. These humans had survived millennia in silence, and now they would not be caught off guard. The reactions among the alien civilizations were mixed. Some were curious and fascinated. They sent envoys hoping to make contact and learn from these humans. Others were cautious, fearing that any interaction could be dangerous. There were whispers among fleets. What if humans were stronger than any known civilization? What if they had technology that could destroy fleets in a single move? Fear spread quickly, because the presence of humanity was not just a discovery, it was a challenge to the assumptions the galaxy had long held. The humans inside the ship began to communicate among themselves as well. They shared observations, pieced together information about the current state of the galaxy, and began planning. They remembered the mistakes of their ancestors, the conflicts that had led to their disappearance, and the lessons learned during their long sleep. They were patient, not hasty. Every decision was weighed carefully. They were alive again, but they had waited long enough to understand the importance of timing. Meanwhile, the first experiments began with the ship's technology. Humans activated systems that generated energy fields, manipulating gravity and space in ways no one outside had ever seen. Small drones and probes were sent into space, moving with precision and speed that amazed the observing scientists. The aliens watched in disbelief as these humans demonstrated control over forces that had once seemed untouchable. It was clear that their civilization, although ancient, had mastered technology far beyond the galaxy's current understanding. The first official contact was made when a human stepped onto the main observation deck. Their posture was calm but commanding. They spoke slowly, addressing the gathered fleets and observers. The words were measured and clear, indicating intelligence, awareness, and readiness to interact. The galaxy listened closely. For the first time in thousands of years, humans were not silent, not myths, not stories. They were real, alive, and aware. Their presence alone demanded attention, respect, and caution. Inside the ship, systems continued to adapt. The vessel was not just responding. It was cooperating. Energy flowed smoothly. Doors opened automatically. Systems calibrated themselves to the humans' movements. It was a perfect partnership between human and machine, built long ago and maintained through time. The humans understood it completely. The outside world could not yet comprehend it. Every observer could see that these humans had abilities that were not only physical or intellectual, but strategic. They thought, acted, and planned on a scale that no other civilization could match. As the humans explored further, they discovered new sections of the ship that had not yet been activated. Laboratories, armories, command centers, all filled with technology preserved perfectly. Every system was designed to teach, protect, or empower. The humans moved through these areas, not wasting time understanding their capabilities and preparing for the moment they would leave the ship and interact with the galaxy more fully. The outside fleets grew more cautious with each passing hour. Alien commanders realized that these humans were not just survivors, they were a force. Every measurement, every scan, every observation confirmed it. The humans had awakened, adapted, and analyzed. They were calm, intelligent, and patient, which made them unpredictable. The galaxy had been unprepared for this return, and now it had to reconsider its assumptions. In quiet moments inside the ship, humans discussed the galaxy's history. They learned of empires that had risen and fallen, technologies that had developed in their absence, and conflicts that had reshaped systems. They were not surprised, not shocked. They absorbed the information with careful attention, planning their next steps. Their minds were not clouded by emotion. They were focused, aware, and ready. They had awakened to a galaxy that had moved on, but they had not forgotten themselves. The humans' first actions outside the ship were deliberate. They sent controlled signals to the alien fleets, testing communication, establishing intentions, and demonstrating awareness without aggression. Every gesture was precise. They were showing the galaxy that humanity had returned, that they were alive, and that they were aware of the world around them. It was a demonstration of power, but one that carried patience and wisdom, not recklessness. Inside the ship, more humans emerged, exploring, observing, and learning. They were cautious but confident. Every step they took was calculated. They had survived millennia of silence, and now they were taking their place in a galaxy that had forgotten them. They were ready to interact, to understand, and when necessary, to defend themselves. Every system they touched, every technology they activated, every movement they made demonstrated that they were not ordinary beings. They were humanity returned, strong, aware, and prepared. The galaxy watched in awe, fear, and fascination. A species once thought extinct had awakened, and their first interactions showed intelligence, precision, and awareness, far beyond what any civilization had anticipated. It became clear that humanity's silence had not been weakness, it had been patience, strategy, and survival. The aliens realized that the humans were no longer just a story, they were alive, active, and ready. And so the first stage of humanity's return was complete. They had awakened fully, understood their ship, assessed the galaxy, and demonstrated their presence. The galaxy had seen them, studied them, and realized that the myths were true. Humanity was alive, aware, and powerful. The next steps would be more visible, more deliberate, and perhaps more challenging. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never forget the return of humans. The humans had fully awakened now, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that they were not ordinary beings. The first interactions had been cautious, measured, and deliberate, but even those initial steps carried power and authority. Every movement, every glance, every gesture showed confidence and intelligence. The humans had returned not to plead, not to explain, but to observe, understand, and, if necessary, act. The universe, which had assumed they were gone forever, began to see that patience and silence could conceal a force far beyond imagination. Inside their massive ship, the humans explored further. They discovered sections that had not yet been activated, rooms filled with technologies long forgotten, chambers designed for training, laboratories for experimentation, and control centers capable of coordinating energy on an unimaginable scale. Every system was intact, preserved perfectly for millennia. It was clear that the people inside this ship had inherited the best of humanity's knowledge, and now they had the means to apply it. They were not just awakening, they were reclaiming. Outside, alien fleets watched cautiously. Every empire, every civilization that had dismissed humans as myth, now faced the reality of their return. The humans were calm, almost serene, but there was an unmistakable strength in their presence. They moved with precision, analyzing the fleets, calculating energy outputs, and understanding the structures of alien technology. Observers could not hide their astonishment. These humans were not only alive, they were intelligent, aware, and fully capable of defending themselves. The first real demonstration of humanity's power came when a powerful alien faction attempted to test the ship. A fleet approached cautiously, its weapons trained on the massive vessel, signaling a show of dominance. But the humans did not panic. They did not retaliate recklessly. Instead, the ship's systems responded automatically, activating defensive energy fields that disabled the attackers' weapons and propulsion without harming anyone. It was a display of precision and control, not aggression, but the message was clear. These humans were not to be underestimated. Observers across the galaxy were stunned. Fleets that had once believed themselves invincible suddenly realized that humans had mastered forces far beyond their understanding. Energy fields bent space in ways that made attacks impossible. Gravity manipulations stabilized the ship while projecting controlled barriers around it. The humans inside were calm, observing, calculating, and ready to act if necessary. It was a controlled demonstration of power that sent a message louder than words. Humanity had returned, and it was not weak. Within the ship, humans discussed the situation. They were aware of the galaxy watching them, and they were deliberate in their response. They did not seek war, but they understood the importance of demonstrating capability. Their ancestors had learned that patience and strategy were essential for survival, and those lessons had been preserved. The humans were calm, precise, and careful. Every action was deliberate, sending signals to the galaxy that they were aware, capable, and ready. The alien civilizations realized that humans were more than just survivors. They were a species with advanced understanding of energy, space, and technology. Every maneuver the humans made demonstrated intelligence far beyond the current galaxy's capabilities. Even the most powerful fleets could not predict the humans' next move. They had awakened, adapted, and assessed, showing that they were not only alive but strategically superior. The galaxy had underestimated them, and now it would have to reconsider its assumptions. The humans began to explore the outer hull of their ship, activating systems that allowed observation and controlled interaction with the alien fleets. They projected energy pulses not as attacks but as a form of analysis. These pulses disabled weapons, scanners, and engines in a controlled radius, proving that humans had technology far beyond anyone's comprehension. Yet there was no destruction, no violence, only precision. The message was unmistakable. Humanity had returned, and it would act only when necessary, but it would act decisively. Inside the ship, humans continued to awaken fully. More cryogenic chambers opened, and more people stepped into the corridors, each one prepared and aware. They moved with confidence, analyzing, learning, and preparing. They shared knowledge, planned strategies, and began to understand the new galaxy that had emerged during their long absence. Each human carried intelligence, skill, and instinct preserved over 20,000 years, making them a living force ready to interact with a universe that had forgotten them. The alien observers could only watch. They realized that humans had mastered both technology and strategy in ways they could barely comprehend. The humans' actions were calm but powerful, deliberate but unmistakable. Every step, every system activation, every energy manipulation demonstrated that these were not ordinary beings. Humanity had returned as it once had been, strong, intelligent, and prepared. Communication attempts began next. Humans sent controlled messages to the observing fleets, demonstrating awareness, intelligence, and intent. They were not aggressive, but they were clear. They had returned, and they had power that could not be ignored. The words, the signals, the precision of the communication stunned the galaxy. It was a reminder that humanity had been underestimated, and that their silence for 20,000 years had not been weakness, but patience and strategy. Inside the ship, humans prepared for further exploration. They began to plan how to interact with the galaxy, not recklessly, but strategically. They analyzed civilizations, assessed strengths, weaknesses, and technologies, and began plotting methods of observation, diplomacy, and, if necessary, defense. Every step was careful, deliberate, and informed by the knowledge preserved for millennia. These humans had awakened into a universe that had moved on without them, but they were not lost. They were ready. The alien fleets began to understand the full scope of humanity's capabilities. Energy systems that could bend gravity, shields that could neutralize attacks, propulsion technologies that allowed rapid movement across space, all demonstrated that humans had mastered forces far beyond the current galaxy's understanding. Even the most confident commanders realized that underestimating humanity was a grave mistake. The humans had returned, and they had power, knowledge, and patience. As the hours passed, humanity's presence grew more visible. Observation decks, docking bays, and external sensors revealed humans fully awake, fully aware, and fully prepared. Their ship was a massive fortress, yet a laboratory, a home, and a world all at once. The humans inside had adapted quickly, using technology with skill and precision. Every demonstration of power was controlled, careful, and strategic. They were not reckless. They were deliberate. And the galaxy watched awestruck. Inside, humans shared knowledge among themselves. They learned about civilizations, empires, and technologies that had developed during their absence. They absorbed information quickly, calculated strategies, and prepared for the next steps of interaction. They were cautious, aware, and patient. Humanity had returned, not for immediate conquest, but for careful observation and measured response. They had survived millennia by understanding the value of patience, and now that lesson guided every action. The first small interactions began. Humans communicated through signals, gestures, and controlled displays of technology. They were deliberate in every action, demonstrating intelligence, awareness, and capability. The alien civilizations realized that humans were not only alive, they were advanced, prepared, and strategically powerful. Fleets repositioned, envoys waited, and scholars studied, trying to understand the magnitude of humanity's return. The humans inside the ship continued to explore, test systems, and prepare. They were methodical, deliberate, and aware of the eyes watching them. They understood that the galaxy had assumed they were extinct, and they used this advantage to observe, assess, and demonstrate. Every display of power was precise, controlled, and calculated. Humanity had been underestimated for 20,000 years, and now the galaxy was beginning to understand the truth. For the first time in millennia, humanity was not silent. They had awakened, assessed, and begun to demonstrate their capabilities. The galaxy had observed, analyzed, and slowly realized that these were not ordinary beings. Humanity had survived, returned, and reclaimed its place in the universe. Their presence alone changed the balance of power, the understanding of technology, and the perception of history. The myths were true. Humanity was alive, aware, and ready. The first stage of this return was complete. Humans had awakened fully, explored their ship, demonstrated power, and made their presence known. The galaxy had seen them, studied them, and begun to understand that patience, intelligence, and preparation could conceal a force far greater than anyone had imagined. Humanity had returned, not with chaos, not with aggression, but with awareness, strength, and control, and the universe would never be the same. The humans were fully awake now, and the galaxy could no longer ignore them. Every observer, every fleet, every empire knew the truth. Humanity had returned. But this return was not chaotic or aggressive. It was deliberate, controlled, and powerful. The humans had spent 20,000 years in silence, preparing, waiting, and surviving. Now they were ready to reclaim their place in the universe, not with rash decisions, but with strategy, knowledge, and purpose. Inside their colossal ship, humans moved with confidence. They had explored every corridor, mastered every system, and assessed the galaxy in detail. Their understanding of energy, gravity, propulsion, and technology was far beyond what anyone outside had imagined. Yet despite this, they acted with patience. Every movement, every command, every gesture was measured, deliberate, and precise. They were aware of the eyes watching them, and they understood the importance of timing. Outside, the alien fleets remained cautious. They had seen humans disable weapons, manipulate energy, and control space with ease. They had witnessed humans analyze fleets and technology with speed and precision. No empire had faced anything like this before. The myths of Earth had become reality, and the reality was far stronger than the legends had ever suggested. Slowly, fear and awe spread across the galaxy. Humans were no longer silent, and their presence was undeniable. The first direct contact came when humans projected a signal across several sectors. It was not an attack. It was a message, clear and deliberate. Every fleet, every planet, every observer could hear it. Humanity had returned. They were alive. They were aware. They were ready to engage with the galaxy on their own terms. There was no threat in their voice, but the power behind the message was unmistakable. It was a reminder that humanity had survived, adapted, and prepared. No one could underestimate them again. Inside the ship, humans began to organize. They were aware of the knowledge they had preserved, the skills they possessed, and the technology at their disposal. They shared strategies, assessed the capabilities of alien civilizations, and began planning how to re-enter the galaxy fully. This was not a hasty plan. It was deliberate, precise, and informed by centuries of understanding. Every decision carried weight, and every action was calculated. Humanity had returned not just to exist, but to thrive. Observers noticed how humans used their ship to demonstrate capability. Energy fields bent space, shields activated that could neutralize entire fleets, and propulsion systems allowed instant movement across vast distances. Every demonstration was controlled, precise, and non-lethal. Humans were showing the galaxy that they were powerful, aware, and capable, but not reckless. Their presence was a statement. Humanity had returned, and it would act wisely, decisively, and strategically. The first alliances began to form, though cautiously. Some alien civilizations, awed by humanity's return, sought cooperation. Others remained wary, keeping their fleets close and their distance measured. The humans communicated carefully, offering information and sharing insights about the galaxy. They did not seek dominance through fear, but through awareness and understanding. Every action was deliberate, every interaction calculated. Humanity had learned that patience and intelligence were stronger than aggression. As humans explored the outer galaxy, they discovered hidden vessels, long-dormant ships, and technologies buried in asteroids, moons, and uncharted planets. These were remnants of their civilization, preserved and waiting for the right moment. Slowly, humans began to activate them, bringing more resources, ships, and knowledge into play. The galaxy watched as humanity expanded not recklessly, but methodically, increasing their presence while maintaining control and balance. Inside the ship, humans also focused on understanding new civilizations. They studied cultures, technologies, and political structures that had emerged during their absence. They assessed potential allies and potential threats, learning quickly and adapting their strategies. They were patient yet proactive. Their long silence had taught them the value of observation, planning, and careful action. Humanity had returned not only to survive but to lead, and they were ready to do so with wisdom. The first major demonstration of power came when a hostile fleet attempted to provoke the humans. It was a test, a challenge, and perhaps a mistake. Humans responded with precision, activating energy fields that neutralized weapons and propulsion without harming any life. The demonstration was silent, controlled, and terrifyingly effective. The galaxy understood at that moment that humans had mastered forces far beyond anyone's comprehension. Their patience was not weakness, it was preparation. Their silence had been strategy. Alien leaders began to realize that the myths were true. Humans were not just survivors, they were masters of technology, strategy, and adaptation. Every fleet that had thought itself safe now reevaluated its position. Every empire that had dismissed Earth now understood the cost of underestimating humanity. The galaxy, once confident and complacent, now felt caution and respect. Humanity had returned not to conquer recklessly, but to reclaim its rightful place. Inside the ship, humans activated more systems, revealing the full scope of their capabilities. Laboratories, armories, observation decks, and command centers all came alive. The ship was not just a vessel, it was a mobile world capable of incredible feats. Humans worked together, sharing knowledge, coordinating systems, and planning the next phase of their reemergence. They were aware of the galaxy watching them, and they understood the importance of demonstrating intelligence alongside power. The first step of integration began when humans offered knowledge and cooperation to certain civilizations. They shared insights about energy, propulsion, and strategy that were previously unknown. This was not a gift, it was a controlled demonstration of capability and a test of trust. Civilizations that accepted it learned quickly, while those that hesitated faced careful observation and subtle demonstrations of human strength. Humanity had returned with wisdom, knowledge, and power, and the galaxy was learning that patience and strategy were as important as might. As humans expanded their influence, they also maintained caution. They understood the value of diplomacy, observation, and controlled engagement. Every interaction with alien civilizations was deliberate, measured, and calculated. Humanity had survived 20,000 years because they had mastered patience and planning, and now those lessons guided their actions. They were powerful, aware, and fully prepared to reclaim their place, but they were not reckless. Every step was deliberate, every decision strategic, and every action controlled. The galaxy could no longer deny humanity's presence. Fleets repositioned, scholars studied, and empires reevaluated their histories. The myths were real. The stories were true. Humans had returned, fully awakened, fully capable, and fully aware. They were not just another species. They were a civilization that had endured time, mastered technology, and reclaimed their place among the stars. Inside the ship, humans prepared for further exploration and integration. They mapped star systems, activated hidden resources, and coordinated plans for their return to the wider galaxy. They communicated carefully, shared knowledge selectively, and observed every reaction. Humanity had returned, but it had returned with intelligence, patience, and control. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not passivity. And a species underestimated for millennia can return with unmatched power. The final stage of humanity's return was underway. The galaxy, once confident and dismissive, now recognized the truth. Humans had returned alive, aware, and prepared. They had survived millennia, mastered technology, and learned the value of patience. Their presence alone reshaped the balance of power, the understanding of history, and the perception of what was possible. Humanity was not just back. They were ready to reclaim their place, and the universe could no longer ignore them. And so, after 20,000 years of silence, humanity finally revealed itself fully. The galaxy had witnessed the return of a species thought lost. They had awakened, assessed, and demonstrated their capabilities. They had been patient, strategic, and intelligent. The myths had been real, and now the reality was undeniable. Humans had returned stronger than ever, and the universe would never be the same again.